The morning sky over New York was still pale when Flight 237 prepared for takeoff. The cabin lights glowed softly as passengers found their seats, some chatting, some yawning, and others already closing their eyes, hoping to rest through the 3-hour flight to Denver. The air smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel. For most passengers, it was just another ordinary day in the sky. Among them sat a woman named Emily Carter, in row 12 by the window. She was a commercial pilot with 10 years of experience, though today she wasn't in uniform. Instead, she wore a light gray sweater, jeans, and a pair of comfortable sneakers. She had just finished a long week of flying and was finally taking a short break to visit her sister in Denver. Her eyes were tired but peaceful, and she was looking forward to doing nothing more than sleeping through the flight. For once, she wasn't the one in charge of takeoff or landing. She could simply be a passenger. As the plane took off, Emily leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights below shrink into tiny dots. The engines roared softly, and soon the plane rose above the clouds where everything was calm and bright. The seatbelt sign went off, and flight attendants began moving up and down the aisle, offering drinks and snacks. Emily declined politely. All she wanted was sleep. The rhythm of the plane, the quiet hum of engines, and the soft conversations around her slowly faded away as her eyes closed. An hour passed. The sun outside grew stronger, painting the clouds golden. Passengers relaxed. Some watched movies, others scrolled through their phones, and a few, like Emily, drifted in peaceful slumber. Everything seemed fine until a sudden flicker of light caught the attention of a few passengers near the cockpit. The flight attendants exchanged quick glances and moved briskly toward the front. Something didn't seem right. At first, no one in the cabin knew what was happening. A quiet tension filled the air. Then, without warning, the intercom crackled to life. The captain's voice came through, but it wasn't the calm, steady tone passengers usually heard. It was shaky and strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any pilot on board, please make yourself known to the cabin crew immediately." The words echoed across the cabin, leaving everyone stunned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A baby's cry broke the silence, and anxious whispers rippled through the rows. "Did he just say a pilot? What's going on? Is this serious?" People turned in their seats, searching for answers in each other's faces. Even those who were half asleep sat up straight, hearts pounding. Emily stirred awake, her pilot's instincts immediately sensing something was off. She blinked, trying to remember where she was. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. But when she saw the worried faces around her, she realized the voice over the speaker wasn't her imagination. It was real. Her years in aviation training rushed back to her mind like lightning. Without hesitation, she reached into her bag and pulled out her ID card, the one that read Captain Emily Carter, Skyline Airways. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up quickly. "Excuse me," she said to a flight attendant who was hurrying down the aisle, her face pale with fear. "I'm a pilot. What's happening?" The attendant's eyes widened in surprise and relief. "Oh, thank God," she breathed out. "Please come with me." "It's the captain. Something's wrong. He's collapsed." Passengers moved aside to make room as Emily followed the attendant toward the cockpit. Some reached out to her, whispering, "Please help," while others simply watched in shock as this calm woman from row 12 was led to the front. Every step she took seemed to pull the air tighter with tension. Inside, her mind was already switching to professional mode. She didn't know exactly what she was walking into, but she knew she had to stay calm. That's what pilots do. They stay calm when everyone else can't. When the attendant opened the cockpit door, Emily's heart clenched. The scene inside was worse than she expected. The co-pilot looked pale and frightened, his hands trembling on the controls. Beside him, the captain was slumped over his seat, unconscious. His headset hung loosely around his neck. Alarms were flashing on the control panel, and the plane had started to sway slightly. "What happened?" Emily asked quickly, moving toward the controls. The co-pilot stammered. He suddenly stopped responding. "I tried to wake him, but he didn't move. I think it's a heart problem. I've sent out a distress message, but..." His voice cracked. "I can't do this alone." Emily took a deep breath. "Okay, listen to me. I'm Captain Emily Carter. I'm going to help you. Take a breath and stay with me." Her tone was steady, the kind that cuts through panic like a knife through fog. She quickly checked the control panel. The aircraft was stable but slightly off course due to the co-pilot's distraction. The autopilot was still engaged, keeping them level for now. The captain's condition was critical, but there was no time to panic. Emily gently leaned over, checking his pulse. He was breathing but weak. She turned to the flight attendant, who was standing by the door with trembling hands. "Get the medical kit and see if there's a doctor or nurse on board. Go." As the attendant ran back into the cabin, Emily took the captain's seat. Her fingers moved smoothly over the controls, adjusting the altitude. "Okay, we're stable," she said to the co-pilot. "Tell me our position." "About 120 miles east of Kansas City," he replied, still shaking. "Good," she said. "We'll need to divert. I'll call ATC." Her hand reached for the radio switch. "Kansas City Center, this is Flight 237, requesting immediate medical emergency landing. The captain is incapacitated. I'm Captain Emily Carter, licensed commercial pilot. I've taken control of the aircraft." There was a pause, then the clear voice of air traffic control responded. "Copy that, Flight 237. We're rerouting you to Kansas City International. You're cleared to descend when ready. We're alerting emergency medical services." Relief flickered across Emily's face for a split second, but she stayed focused. She turned to the co-pilot. "You're doing fine. Keep monitoring fuel and weather. We'll get through this together." Meanwhile, in the cabin, passengers could feel the tension but didn't know the details. The flight attendants were doing their best to calm them down, saying there was a medical issue being handled by trained personnel. Still, fear lingered in the air. People held hands, prayed quietly, or stared out the windows, wondering what was really happening up front. Back in the cockpit, Emily's heart was steady. She had handled emergencies before, but this was different. She wasn't supposed to be flying this plane. Yet she couldn't think about that. Her training had taught her one thing above all. When something goes wrong, you act. You don't wait. You don't hesitate. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, shaking violently for a few seconds. The co-pilot gasped, gripping the controls too tightly. "It's okay," Emily said, her tone calm but firm. "Just keep your hand steady. Follow my lead." Her voice carried authority, not loud but powerful enough to bring a sense of control back to the situation. Slowly, the turbulence eased, and the plane leveled out again. Minutes passed that felt like hours. The radio chatter continued as air traffic control guided them toward the new route. Emily coordinated everything efficiently, making quick calculations and giving the co-pilot clear instructions. She checked the cabin pressure, fuel, and autopilot alignment. Every switch and button mattered now. When the flight attendant returned, she whispered, "There's a doctor helping the captain. He's breathing but still unconscious." Emily nodded. "Good, keep me updated." For a moment, she looked out through the cockpit window. The clouds were thick below them, glowing faintly under the morning sun. The world looked peaceful from up here, a strange contrast to the pressure inside the small cockpit. She couldn't help but think how fragile things could be, how quickly an ordinary flight could turn into a fight for survival. The co-pilot looked at her and said quietly, "I don't know what we would have done if you weren't here." Emily gave a small smile. "You'd have done what you needed to. That's what pilots do." But deep down, she knew luck, or maybe fate, had placed her in row 12 that day. As they continued flying westward, the situation slowly began to feel under control. Air traffic control confirmed that emergency teams were ready at Kansas City Airport. The weather report showed moderate turbulence, but nothing unmanageable. Emily reviewed the landing procedure in her mind. Every detail mattered: speed, wind direction, and communication timing. Still, she couldn't forget the sight of the unconscious captain beside her. The weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders, yet it also fueled her determination. She had taken oaths, gone through sleepless nights of training, all for moments like this. Moments where staying calm could save lives. In the cabin, passengers whispered prayers, unaware of the woman who had left her seat to take command. They only knew someone had stepped forward when no one else could. A few had seen her pass by, her quiet face, her confident walk, and though they didn't know her name, they silently hoped she was the one who could make things right. Back in the cockpit, Emily adjusted the controls one last time and checked the radar. The descent would begin soon. She made a quick note on the flight log, marking the time and reason for diversion. Her voice was steady as she radioed ATC again. "Kansas City Center, Flight 237 ready to begin descent. Roger that, Flight 237, the controller replied. Runway 27 in use. You're cleared for descent to 10,000 feet. The plane moved steadily through the sky, but inside the cockpit, the air was thick with focus and tension. Emily sat upright in the captain's seat, her hands firm on the controls, her eyes constantly moving between the instruments and the view outside. The co-pilot followed her instructions closely, trying his best to stay calm, though his hand still trembled slightly. Below them, clouds rolled like waves over the earth. They had less than an hour to reach Kansas City, and every minute mattered. Emily's voice was calm and steady. She had guided countless planes through storms, but this situation was unlike anything she had faced before. She wasn't the assigned pilot. She was a passenger who had stepped into the cockpit by chance, or maybe fate. The thought crossed her mind briefly, but she pushed it aside. There was no time for emotion. Every second, every movement counted now. She spoke into the radio again. Kansas City Center, this is Flight 237. We're descending to 10,000 feet. Cabin crew and passengers are stable. Captain remains unconscious. Requesting priority landing clearance. The controller's voice came through clearly, warm and confident. Flight 237, you are priority 1. Emergency crews are standing by. Wind at 7 knots, visibility moderate. You're cleared to approach runway 27. Copy that, Emily replied. She turned to the co-pilot. All right. We're going to start our descent soon. Set flaps to position 1. Let's make sure the passengers are secure. The co-pilot nodded, quickly moving through the checklist. His earlier fear had faded a little, replaced by focus. He was beginning to trust her completely. Emily had a calmness about her, not loud or commanding, but strong in a way that made others believe things would be okay. In the cabin, passengers could feel the change in altitude as the plane gently began to descend. A few nervous murmurs filled the air. Some people clutched the armrests, others whispered prayers. The flight attendants moved calmly down the aisles, buckling seatbelts and reminding everyone to stay seated. Their calm tone was the result of Emily's steady leadership from the cockpit. Meanwhile, the doctor on board was still attending to the captain. His pulse was weak but steady, and oxygen had been given to him. The crew informed Emily through the intercom that he was stable for now. She nodded, though her focus never left the controls. Tell them to keep monitoring his breathing, she said firmly. As the aircraft continued its descent, the sky outside turned darker with thick clouds. Rain streaked across the windows and the turbulence began again. The plane shook slightly and the passengers gasped. Emily adjusted the throttle smoothly, her eyes on the altitude indicator. It's okay, she said softly, more to the co-pilot than herself. We'll ride it out. The co-pilot followed her lead. Flaps set, landing gear on standby. Good, Emily replied. Her voice never wavered. Inside, she felt a rush of adrenaline, but she also felt a strange peace. It was as if her mind had entered a perfect rhythm. No panic, no hesitation, just precision and instinct. Every move was guided by years of training and the deep understanding that dozens of lives depended on her composure. The plane continued to descend through the heavy clouds. Lightning flashed faintly in the distance, though far enough not to threaten them. The radio crackled with updates from air traffic control, keeping her informed of wind direction and runway alignment. She responded clearly each time, her voice professional and confident, giving everyone on the ground assurance that the plane was in capable hands. In the cabin, people noticed how steady the flight had become. A woman sitting near the front whispered to her husband, "Whoever's flying this plane now, they know what they're doing." A few seats back, a little boy looked out the window and said, "We're going down slow, right?" His mother smiled weakly and nodded. "Yes, honey, we're okay." Back in the cockpit, Emily checked the altimeter again. They were approaching 10,000 feet. She called the co-pilot's attention. "Prepare for final approach checklist." He responded quickly, reading out each point from the manual, and she confirmed each one. Their teamwork now felt seamless, as if they had been flying together for years. The storm outside continued to rumble, but Emily handled it with grace. She moved the controls with measured precision, adjusting pitch and speed as needed. Then came another patch of turbulence. The plane jolted sharply, causing several gasps from the cabin. Even the co-pilot flinched. But Emily's grip stayed firm. "Easy," she said. "Don't fight the air. Let it pass." She guided the nose slightly upward, easing the movement, and soon the plane stabilized again. The co-pilot looked at her in quiet admiration. "You're incredible," he whispered. She smiled faintly but said nothing. Her eyes remained on the horizon. Minutes later, the rain began to ease, and through the gray clouds below, the faint lights of Kansas City appeared, small but steady, like a promise waiting at the end of the storm. Emily exhaled slowly. "There it is," she said. "We've got visual contact. Landing gear down." The sound of the landing gear deploying echoed through the cabin. Passengers looked at one another, realizing they were finally close to the ground. Some began whispering prayers of thanks, others simply closed their eyes and waited. In the cockpit, Emily kept her voice steady as she guided the co-pilot. "Reduce throttle to 20%. Flaps full. Keep an eye on our airspeed." The runway lights grew clearer by the second. The wind was still pushing slightly from the side, but she adjusted smoothly, correcting the angle with expert control. The radio came alive again. "Flight 237, you're clear to land. Emergency vehicles are standing by." "Copy, Kansas City," Emily said, her tone even. "We're coming in." The final moments before landing are the hardest for any pilot. Every gust of wind, every second of hesitation could make the difference. Emily's concentration was absolute. She adjusted the nose slightly downward, watching the speed indicator and altitude align perfectly with her calculations. The ground approached fast and the runway stretched ahead, lined with flashing lights. "Here we go," she whispered, almost to herself. The plane descended, the engines roaring softly. The wheels hit the runway with a heavy thud, bounced once, then rolled smoothly. The entire cabin erupted into applause, cheers, and tears of relief. The passengers couldn't see her, but they knew the person flying had just done something extraordinary. Inside the cockpit, Emily gently guided the aircraft down the runway, slowing it to a safe stop. The engines hummed quietly as the plane came to rest at the designated emergency gate. "Flight 237, welcome to Kansas City," came the controller's voice. "Medical teams are approaching your position." "Excellent work, Captain Carter." Emily smiled faintly, though her eyes showed exhaustion. "Thank you, Control. Plane is secure." The co-pilot leaned back in his seat, letting out a long breath. "I can't believe we did it," he said softly. Emily glanced at him, her tone kind but firm. "You did your part. That's what matters." Outside, ambulances and fire trucks surrounded the plane. The emergency teams climbed aboard quickly, carrying medical equipment. The flight attendants opened the cockpit door and guided them to the unconscious captain. Emily stood aside, letting them through. She felt the tension finally begin to fade, replaced by a quiet wave of relief. As the passengers disembarked one by one, many looked toward the cockpit, curious to see the person who had saved them. Some caught a glimpse of her, a woman with calm eyes and tired shoulders, still sitting quietly near the controls. When a few passengers thanked her personally, she simply nodded, her voice soft. "I'm glad you're all safe." The co-pilot watched her for a moment, then said, "You know, they'll talk about this flight for a long time." Emily smiled, but her answer was simple. "They'll remember that everyone stayed calm. That's what matters." Outside the plane, the rain had stopped. The emergency lights reflected off the wet runway as medical staff carried the captain away on a stretcher. Emily stepped out into the cool air, closing her eyes for a moment. The sound of the engines cooling down mixed with distant sirens. For the first time since she had been woken up from her seat in row 12, she allowed herself to breathe freely. A senior official from the airline approached her, shaking her hand firmly. "Captain Carter," he said, "you saved 146 lives today." "Thank you," she smiled humbly. "I just did what needed to be done," she replied. Reporters later tried to reach her for interviews, but Emily quietly declined. She never sought attention. To her, being a pilot was not about glory or recognition. It was about responsibility and composure, the ability to guide others through fear with calmness and skill. Days later, when passengers shared their stories online, they spoke about her with deep respect. One wrote, "There was a calm woman who stood up when no one else did. She didn't panic. She didn't shout. She just walked to the front and brought us home." Another wrote, "I don't even know her name, but I'll never forget her voice. The kind of voice that made you believe everything would be okay." The co-pilot, too, shared his gratitude in an internal airline report. He described how her steady hands and clear thinking had not only saved the aircraft, but also kept him focused when he was seconds away from panic. She was the calm in the storm, he wrote. Without her, I don't know what would have happened. The airline later confirmed that the original captain had survived after receiving immediate medical care. When he recovered, the first person he asked about was Emily.